Pialino Wampoyowan, Kenishki Inistoke, Namantimo Machtice, Tlenika, Tlachihualistli, auxiliary, Wan Nokia Nimech Machtis, Tlenika, Yaya. Hi everyone. Today we're going to be learning about auxiliary verbs, and I'm also going to be teaching you about the imperfect tense or the Yaya. You will notice that today I don't have any live students in the class, and that's because I did have class yesterday on live on Zoom. However, I didn't record it because I didn't have the slides yet ready. But today, Saturday, I made the slides and I decided that I'm going to just do the class and present it and upload it on YouTube so that my previous students can watch it, and also the people who are on YouTube can also watch it. And so basically, I hope that you enjoy the class. There aren't going to be any students responding, so I'm just here recording it by myself. But anyways, I hope that you do learn a lot, and yeah, let's start the class, and let me start sharing my screen and sharing the presentation. Okay. All right. So today we're going to be learning about auxiliary verbs and the imperfect tense. Okay. So what you're going to be learning today, I'm going to change the format of the class. I'm not going to have the class like I normally do where I present a bunch of pictures. Today, instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a short Nahuatl story, and then we're going to dissect that short Nahuatl story. And then I'm going to explain to you about auxiliary verbs and how they're used, and the imperfect tense Yaya, and the imperfect tense Yaya with the verb eli, which is to be. Okay. So first, we're going to read a short Nahuatl story, and I'm basically going to read it to you, and then I'm going to break it down piece by piece to tell you exactly what each part means. This story is called Se tepechichi Wan Nopa Cuawit Tlen Cerezo, and this is the whole story. So you see this picture, I photoshopped this one right here. And this is exactly the whole story. This is the entire story. However, I want to let you know that I got this story from mexico.sil.org. It is a fantastic website where basically you can type in mexico.sil.org. This is a linguistic website where you can download all kinds of literature in different types of languages from all over the world, not just Mexico. I believe if you just type in sil.org, you'll find other languages. But if you type in mexico.sil.org, you'll find, look at this, all these different types of Nahuatl. If you click on each one of these Nahuatl, you'll find different stories. So for our purposes, I went and downloaded a book from this Nahuatl Central Huasteca, and that's where I got this book. Now, I want to give them a shout out because they have all of these documents, and they're available for free, for at least they share them for free, and they have pretty much most of them under the Creative Commons license, which basically means that I am able to share it publicly, and as long as I give attribution, and I put the attribution at the description of this video, but essentially it's under the Creative Commons license, which basically means I can share it and dissect it publicly and not necessarily have to worry about the copyright. So I read all the terms and everything. So essentially, we're going to take a story from one of these books, and this story is called Se tepechichi Wan Nopa Cuawit Tlen Cerezo. Now, I want you to notice that the writing of this is a little bit different, and that's because this is a Nahuatl Central Huasteca Central, so it's not exactly the same as the Nahuatl that we're learning. And you'll notice that certain features are different, like the letters that they use and how they have or don't have certain letters. And so I'm basically going to read you the story, and then we're going to dissect it and figure out what's different or where it's not different, etc. So the story is called Se tepechichi Wan Nopa Cuawit Tlen Cerezo. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to try to make it understandable. Okay. So I know that you're not going to understand it right away, but don't worry, I'm going to break it down. Okay. Se tonal se tepechichi ahsiko campase cuawit tlen cerezo. Pehqui nehnemi wan quiyawalotihnemi nopa cuawit wan Ahcotlachiyaya huescapan. Itak para nopa Cuauit, Quipixtoya miak itlahka, tlen itoka cerezas, katli nelia ahuiak. Huasteca Pehqui and Huitoni, Chicahuac, Pampa Huistoya, que nopa huelis kiasis, nopa Cualantli, pero yonse amo kikwik. San tlami siyahki Huitoni. Teipa ika pinawali huan Cualantli, moilwi san Yaha. Ipa amo nihnequiyaya ni Cualantli pampatlawel shohkok. All right, I know that was a lot, and I honestly did not expect you to understand it all. That's not the whole point. The whole point of this is for you to hear what Nahuatl actually sounds like in regular speech, at regular speed. And we're gonna go sentence by sentence. We're gonna break this down. So if you notice, there were a couple of differences in that Nahuatl that I just read to you. And what you notice is that there's a different alphabet. And this is because Nahuatl is not yet standardized. Now we're moving closer to standardizing the language. And so apparently there's been a lot of conferences and it looks like it's converging more and more towards a practical alphabet. So probably it'll become the practical alphabet, the one we'll be using generally. And so you can see kind of like what the practical alphabet, like this variety is, that's what they're using because this was written by native speakers. And you'll notice that this variety, they don't have the TL sound. They actually just have the letter T. So if you remember a long time ago in my earlier classes, I told you that some varieties don't have the TL and that if you couldn't pronounce the TL sound, that you could just pronounce it as a T. And so in this example of this class, you'll see that pretty much this variety doesn't have the T. So you saw Cuauit instead of Cuauit. And they use the J instead of an H. So Pehqui instead of Pehqui. On the right side, that's how we would write it. The S for the S sound, and we normally would write it with the Z. So they write it as san, and then they would write it as san. Sorry, they write it with an S, we write it with the C, but it's still pronounced the same, san. And you'll notice that they also have some N's that are missing. So they say teipa instead of teipan. And that's because some varieties or most common varieties right now, a lot of the times on a final N, they don't pronounce it. So essentially, this person or whoever wrote these, the people who wrote these, they didn't write the final N because they don't pronounce the final N. So in their mind, there is no N there. But in our mind, there is. And honestly, some varieties say teipa, some say teipan. It depends. In our variety, we're supposed to say it. Okay, so let's start with the first sentence. Actually, this is not the first sentence. This is actually the title of the story. So it starts with Se tepechichi wanopa cuauit ten cerezo. Okay, so first let's start with Se tepechichi. If you notice, they wrote it as SE. We would write it as CE for se, one, se tepechichi. If you really think about this word tepechichi is one of those compound nouns that I taught you previously. So we have the word chichi and we have the word tepet. So tepet is mountain or hill and chichi is dog. So honestly, when I looked at the picture of this story, it was unclear what kind of a dog it was or if it was a wolf or a coyote. But I understand this as maybe like a wild dog or a mountain dog or maybe a wolf. Because or a coyote, because they also have a different word, coyochichi, and coyochichi means coyote. So possibly they mean wild dog or dog from the mountains, dog from the cerros, etc. I'm not exactly sure, but it's some kind of wolf or dog. If you look at the picture, it looks like a wolf. Se tepechichi, one mountain dog, one nopa, cuauit. Okay, so you know one, and one word that I haven't yet taught you is the word nopa. Now, I taught you that the word is inin for this and inon for that. But Nahuatl also, this Nahuatl from the Huasteca also has a different word for that, and that word is nopa. So you could say inon or you could say nopa. So nopa cuauit is that tree. That tree, nopa cuauit. Notice that they wrote cuauit without the TL because that's how they say it, nopacuawit. But in our variety, it would be nopacuawit. Okay. And then so set tepechichi, one mountain dog and that tree. And then it says tlen cerezo. Now they don't say tlen, but that word ten right there is basically tlen cerezo. Now, in the past, you probably remember that I taught you that tlen means what, but this tlen doesn't only have this meaning of what, it has actually multiple meanings. And so in this case, this tlen does not mean what, this tlen means of. So what happened was that Nahuatl did not used to have the word of by itself, but then through the influence of Spanish, they created a new word, tlen, or not a new word, they Spanishized a Nahuatl word. So you know, like the word of in Spanish is de. Well, there is no letter D in Nahuatl, so they converted it into tlen. So it says tlen cerezo, which would be something like saying, like in Spanish, árbol de cerezo, cuawit tlen cerezo, cherry tree, basically. Tree of cherry or cherry tree, cuawit tlen cerezo. I guess in theory, if you know compound nouns, they could have also called it cerezo cuawit. In my mind, that's more succinct, but this is how they chose to write it. So tepechichi wan nopa cuawit tlen cerezo, that mountain dog and one mountain dog and that cherry tree. That's the title of the story. Cuali. So then let's find out what happened in the story. Okay, so se tonal se tepechichi ahcico campa se cuawit tlen cerezo. Okay, se tonal. So if you remember, tonali, it can mean day in some varieties. In our variety, tonati is day. Tonati means sun, or tonali can also mean sun. So se tonal means one day. Se tonal. Se tepechichi, one mountain dog. Ahcico. Okay, so for now, I want you to ignore this ko because this ko is a very, it's a whole lesson in and of itself, but it's a specific tense in Nahuatl. So ignore that for now, but just pay attention to this verb ahci. If you go look up this verb ahci in the dictionary, you'll find that it means multiple things. It can mean to find something, to reach something, to arrive somewhere, etc. In this case, based on the context, you can figure out that this means the mountain dog, the dog or wolf arrived. Okay, in this case, it means arrived. Así, arrived. And then we have the word campa. If you go look back in lecture of the who, what, when, where, why, I believe in the section of where, I told you the word campa. And I told you that this campa means like at the place or the place of where. So here it means where. And he arrived where se kawit tlen cerezo, where there was a cherry tree. Se kawit tlen cerezo. Now this campa can mean where or the place which or at the place of, etc. So here he arrived at the place of a cherry tree. He arrived where a cherry tree was. Okay, so se tonal, se tepechichi, ahcico. One day a mountain dog arrived Campase Cuawit tlen cerezo, where there was a cherry tree. Cuali? I know it's a lot, and there is a lot of grammar, and I understand that it's a lot, but my whole point is to give you a lot of stories so that you can start getting a lot of grammar, and you could also kind of start seeing how native speakers write. And I break it down for you. If you have any questions, of course, you could always leave them in the description of the video or in the comment section of the YouTube video. And hopefully I'll get around to it if I'm not too busy. So put those questions there. Vale. All right. So let's continue with the story. Pehqui nehnemi wan kiyawalos tinemi nopa cuawit wan Ahcotlachiyaya huescapan. Huescapan. Ooh, this should be huescapan. Oh, it is huescapan with the J. Okay, cuali. So we know this word pehqui, but you may not recognize it because we write it different. So here they write it as pehqui, and we would write it as pehqui like this, but we pronounce it pehqui. They wrote it the way that it sounds. So this J is like an H. So pehqui, that comes from the verb Pehua. So Pehua means to start. So it says right here, he or she started. So in this case, it's talking about the wolf or whatever, or the coyote. So now it's he started, or I guess we could be a woman. I don't know. Pehqui nehnemi. He or she started to walk. Pehqui nehnemi, one, and then here we have a really long word, tinemi. Now, in my mind, I think this actual word is actually should have been tinenki, because they're talking about the past and this verb is in the present tense. But okay, they may have made an error in this part of the story, but tinemi is a very long word, and you're probably like, oh my God, what the heck does that mean? Well, actually, this can be broken down into three parts: ki, the object; yawaloa, the verb; and then this other part, tinemi. Now, this tinemi is a whole lesson in and of itself. It's actually like more advanced Nahuatl, so I wouldn't worry so much about it. But right now, this tinemi means goes along doing something. Goes along doing something. Como like, just kind of like in Spanish, andar, andar. So, quiyawaloa means he encircles it. He encircles it, quiyawaloa. So with this tinemi, it just adds like a nuance of he went along encircling it. So he started walking around that tree, pehqui nehnemi, and then he started encircling it. Tinenki. I think it should say tinenki, honestly, because I don't know why it's talking about the present tense. It should be in the past. Tinenki. He started encircling Nopa Kuawit, that tree. Okay, that part is easy. One, Ahcotlachiyaya. You're like, oh my God, look at all those yayas. Ahcotlachiyaya. Ahcotlachiyaya. Notice that this is actually coming from the verb tlachiya, and you may not have recognized it because here they say tachiya. That's just that this variety doesn't have a TL. So if you go look up this word ahco, it's related to up, towards high. So ahcol means shoulder, ahcol, no ahcol, but ahcopan means up high, ahcopan. Ahcopan means up high. So or up towards the top. So ahcotlachiyaya means, tlachiyaya has multiple meanings, but in this case, tlachiyaya means to watch. So ahcotlachiyaya means he watches towards the top. Ahcotlachiyaya. And this yaya is actually what we're going to be learning today. So the reason that there's three yayas in here is just three yas is just because one of the ya is part of this verb tlachiya, and the other two, other yayas are part of the tense. So ahcotlachiyaya means he was watching towards the top. And this word huescapan means up high. He was looking up really high, basically. In this case, this variety says huescapa, but in our variety, we say huascapan, huascapan. But it's very similar, as you can see. Okay, Kuale. So pehqui nehnemi, wan quiyawalostinenki. I'm saying quiyawalostinenki because it should be in the past, in my opinion. Nopa kuawit, wan ahcotlachiyaya, huescapan. Kuale. Right, so he started walking around, encircling that tree, and then looking up really high. Kuali. All right. Teipan, or what happened next? Kiitak para nopa kuawit, Quipixtoya miak itlahka, tlenitoka cerezas, katlinelia ahuiak. I know that's a lot, right? But you do know some of these parts. For example, kiitak. We've seen kiitak multiple times. This is coming from the verb ita, to see, ki, it, and k, the past tense. So kiitak, he saw it. And then we have this word para. Now, if you speak Spanish, you're like, oh, para just means para. No. Yes and no. In Nahuatl, for some reason, the word para has been changed. And the word para does mean para in some of the sense that it means in Spanish, like in order to. That is one of the meanings that para has in Nahuatl. But it's also changed, at least in the Huasteca and maybe in other varieties. I think in other varieties they say inik or ika, but in this variety they say para, and it can mean in order to, or it can mean that. So kiitak para does not mean he saw in order to. In this case, it means kiitak, he saw that. He saw that. So like he saw that it was big, or he saw that it was great, etc. Like that kind of a that. Kiitak para no pakwawit. He saw that tree. He saw that tree, because remember this also means that, but like that one, nopa, that one. So kiitak para no pakwawit. He saw that tree. Quipixtoya. You may not recognize this word right away, Quipixtoya, but you actually do already know this word, and it comes from Pehqui. So it comes from pilla. So in our variety, we say Quipixqui. Now, Quipixqui means he had it, or it had it. In this case, it's talking about the tree. So it's saying it had. Quipixtoya. Now, you're probably wondering, like, what the heck does this toya mean? And actually, it is a tense in Nahuatl that we have yet to learn. but it comes from pish. I think that this variety uses pishtoya to mean the past tense instead of quipixqui. I don't know why they don't say quipixqui. But in our variety, quipixtoya would mean like he had it, which kind of doesn't really make sense. Had in this context. So will basically mean it had. It basically means like it had. Okay, so he saw that tree had miak itlahka. Miak, many. Miak itlahka. This itlahka means it's fruit. Tlahka meaning coming from tlahkayot, and basically means fruit. Fruit. Itlahka. Itlahka. This E is possessed, its fruit. It had its fruit, tlenitoka, whose name is, which its name is, tlenitoka, its name, itoka, tlenitoka. Oh, here I put of, but I actually meant which. So sometimes tlen also means which. So tlen itoka cerezas, which name is cerezas, whose name are cerezas, are cherries, basically. Catli, catlilla, in their variety, they say cati, but in our variety, we would say catlilla, or some varieties say catli. So catlilla, which Nelia Ahuiak. If you remember last class, I believe, or one class before, I think in the class of the Q&A session that we had previously, I told you that Nelia means very. So here, Nelia means very, and this word Ahuiak is delicious. Nelia Ahuiak, very delicious. You say, Inin tlamantli, inin tlacuali, Nelia Ahuiak. This food is very delicious. This word ahuiak is also related to smelling good, something that's pleasant. So it doesn't just mean delicious, but it tends to be used with food to mean delicious. And cherries are delicious. So this tree, Quipixtoya, it had miak itlahka, a lot of fruit, tlenitoka, cherries, whose name are cherries, cerezas, catlilla, which are very delicious. Nelia ahuiak. Quali. Okay, now this one looks really long. I'm trying to like not get crazy. And I know that this is very heavy grammatical, but you can do this. Obviously, you could always read these sentences later and read the story again, and you'll finally hopefully get it. And this is just a taste of what you could eventually do. I hope that my explanations are clear, but if they're not, put questions in the bottom, okay? So, Huasteca, Pehqui, Huitoni, Chicahuac, Pampa, Huitoya, Quehnopa, Huelis, Quiasis, Nopa, Cualantli, pero Yonce, Amo, Quiquic. Okay, so Huasteca. Now this Huasteca, I don't know why, but this Huasteca in Huasteca Nahuatl means entonces. The closest translation is Spanish entonces. English would be something like and then. Oh, it should say right there, and then. And then entonces. So Huasca means like entonces, like, you know, when you're saying a story like, and then this happened. Huasca Pehqui Huitoni. So you know this word Pehqui, and you know this word Huitoni. So he started Huitoni to jump. Pehqui Huitoni, he started to jump. And then he started to jump Chicahuac. Chicahuac, it has many meanings, but it can mean strong. So he started to jump strong or fast. We actually don't know if it's strong or fast, but probably with a lot of force because he wants those cherries, ¿qué? So Pehqui Huitoni Chicahuac, he started jumping strong. Pampa, because Moilhuitoya. Now, of course, I told you that this toya, I haven't talked about it, but basically it means had done something. And in this case, moilhuia is the verb that in the present tense, it's moilhuia. Moilhuia can mean, it comes from the verb ilia, to tell someone something, but moilhuia is to tell yourself something, which in Nahuatl means to think something. So moilhuia means to think. So Moilhuitoya means he had thought. Él había pensado. Moilhuitoya, he had thought. Quehnopa. Now this verb quehnopa, in other varieties it might be quennopa with the N, and it means like that. Quennopa. Remember, this nopa means that one. Well, quennopa or quehnopa means like that. He thought that like that. Moilhuitoya, quehnopa, he thought that like that. Huelis quiasis, he would be able to find. Now notice here we're combining two verbs. Now you don't know this verb hueli yet, but hueli means to be able to do something. Hueli, mi hueli, I can. Mi hueli nichchiwa, I can do it. Mi hueli nichchiwa. So huelis quiasis, it says he will be able to reach. Now remember I told you that this verb ahci means it can mean to arrive, or but in this case it could also mean to find, but in this case it means to reach something. So the general meaning of ahci is like to reach something, to reach a destination, to reach a place, to reach and find something. So here it says he thought that he would be able to, oh, I put find, I meant reach right there. Oops. He will be able to reach. So he thought that by jumping so high, he would be able to reach. He had thought, Moilhuitoya, quehnopa, huelis quiasis. He had thought that like that, he would be able to reach Nopa Cualantli, that fruit. Now, one of the words for fruit is tlahcayot, another word is Cualantli. Oh, I just noticed they should say Cualantli, not tlahcayot. Oops, there's a lot of typos in here. I'm sorry. So there's the and right there. And then there's the quat. Well, this T, okay, it should be Cualantli. This word qua, it can mean wooden, or it can mean what is it, a wild. So this Cualantli could mean like wild fruit or just fruit. It's kind of, or tree fruit, something like that. It's actually very vague what it actually means, because qua, this qua can mean it can mean tree, it can mean wood, it can mean wild. So, but in this case, I think it means like tree fruit. Cualantli. And then it says yonse. Oh, it says pero yonse, but not one. Now this phrase not one, it comes from the word ni once, which means not even one, but it translates as zero, not even one. Yonse or ni once. So pero ni once, not even one or zero. Amoquiquic, he was not able to get anything. Cui is to grab or to get. So he was not able to grab, he was able to grab zero. He was not able to grab anything, basically, even though he jumped. Quali? Okay. And we're getting closer to the end of the story. Hope I haven't bored you. Santlami, oh yeah, well, I'm gonna say Santami. Well, they wrote it as Santami, but in our writing we would say Santlami. San tlami siyahki Huitoni. Now, I think that in this sentence, I think that the person may have made some grammatical errors, or I don't know if this is just the way that they speak in this variety, but it doesn't. I think it should say San tlanki siyahki Huitoni. Like he finished becoming, like he ended up being tired is basically what. He ended up being tired of jumping is what this is, I think, trying to say. So this is san, it means just. Tlami, he finished. See, this is why I think it should say he finished. But it's in the present tense, so it's kind of weird because they're saying he finishes. He finishes, or I guess in Spanish it would be like se acaba. And then he finishes, and then siyahki, they wrote it like this, siyahki, but if you go look it up in the dictionary in ours, it would be siowi, like this, siyawi or siowi. It means to become tired. So siowi is a class 2 verb, and in the past tense, it becomes siyahki or siyahki. And in this case, it is to become tired, or he became tired, and then Huitoni means jumping. Now, I think it should have said San tlanki siyahki Huitoni, but whatever. But basically, this whole phrase is something like he just ended up becoming tired of jumping. So he started jumping, but couldn't get the cherries. He just got tired of jumping, basically. We're almost done with the story. Teipan y Campinawali wan Cualantli moilwi san Yaha. Okay, so Teipan, in their varieties they say Teipa, but Teipan is the how we say it. In other varieties they say Satepan, like in Guerrero they say Satepan, or Sateipan, or Santepan, or Satepan for sure. Satepan later, or Teipan later. Ika with pinawali. Now this, if you go look up this verb pinawa, it means to become ashamed. So pinawali is shame itself. So he felt later with shame, teipa ika pinawali, later with shame, one Cualantli. They wrote it as Cualantli, but here it's Cualantli. This comes from the verb cualani, to become angry. So Cualantli means anger. In our variety, it also means a problem. So Cualantli, anger. So later with shame and anger, Teipan y Capinawali wan Cualantli, moilwi, he thought, san Yaha, just to himself. So Yaha, I haven't taught you this, but Nahuatl has a way to say an action is being done to oneself, like here he thought to himself, or he said to himself, but this Yaha can also mean he himself. So Naha, I myself, Taha, you yourself, Yaha, he or she himself. I have to remember what the plural form is, but I think it's Tojuantinya. Ooh, I have to look that up. I don't remember. Tojuantinya. I think so. Imojuantinya and Yahuantinya. I don't remember how it is in plural. I have to look that up. But anyways, the Yaha means he himself. So he thought to himself, just to himself, basically is what this San Yaha means. He thought just to himself. Ipa. Now, Ipa amo nihnekiyaya ni Cualantli Pampa tlawel shokok. Now, actually, I don't know what this Ipa means, but this Ipa, I can tell from context, probably means well, or something like anyways, because he says anyways, or well, amo nihnekiyaya. Amo, not. Nihneki, I want it. And then this yaya we haven't learned, but we're gonna learn nihnekiyaya means I wanted. Amo nihnekiyaya, I didn't want. Ni Cualantli, this fruit. Now, ni is another way to say this. So we learned eating. The short version of eating is ni. So inin is this, and so is ni. So ni cuatlacayot, this fruit. Pampa, because tlahuel, very, shokok, bitter. So basically saying, well, I didn't want it anyway because this fruit is bitter. So he's been jumping, and then it's like, yeah, right, I didn't really want it, even though I've been jumping. And in my mind, this coyote did want it, because if he didn't want it, why would he be jumping? So he's a liar. He's a liar. He's lying. He's just mad because he couldn't get the cherry, and we all know how that is. We feel jealous when we can't get something. So he thinks it's bitter, but he's really the bitter one in the story. Okay. Anyways, so that's basically a short story. So now I'm going to give you a lesson on auxiliary verbs. Okay, and don't worry about the whole story. At the end of this lecture, I put all the translation of all the story sentence by sentence. So you could go look it up at the end, and you'll see it at the end of this lecture. And I inserted this slide by accident. I should not have this slide there. Let me delete that slide. This is what happens when you present and then you don't realize what the things you messed up until you're presenting, and then you're like, oh yeah, that slide wasn't supposed to be there. Anyways, so in this story, you may or may not have noticed that there are auxiliary verbs. Basically, what this means is that there's two verbs in sequence, and one verb is helping helping modify the second verb. I don't actually know the grammatical definition of auxiliary verb. I know auxiliary means it helps, quote unquote, from auxilio in Spanish, to help. But basically you have two verbs and one verb modifies the other verb. And so, for example, here in the story, you see that they say Pehqui nehnemi. He started to walk. Pehqui nehnemi. So he has the word to start, Pehua, and nehnemi, Pehqui nehnemi. He started to walk. We also had in the story, he said, Pehqui and Huitoni, he started to jump. He started to jumpo. He started to jumpo. Okay, he started to jumpo. Okay, well, Pehqui and Huitoni, he started to jump. And then also, Huelis Kiasis. Now, I wrote it the way we would have written it, but basically, he will be able to, in the future, to reach it. Huelis, Weli, coming from the verb weli, to be able to, and asi, to reach. So Huelis Kiasis, he would be able to reach. He will be able to reach. Okay, Quali. And then, so here's an example of the verb can, weli, to be able to, and asi, to reach. So Huelis Kiasis will be able to reach it. Okay, and Siahki, now they wrote it with an S in the story, but Siahki, he became tired, and then Huitoni, he became tired of jumping. So Siahki Huitoni, he tired of jumping, basically. Quali. So those are the auxiliary verbs that were used in that story. That's why I chose that story, even though it seems like a very random story. That's why I chose it. Okay, so essentially, in Nahuatl, you can make complex sentences just like you can in Spanish or English. And you could have two verbs next to each other that modify each other. So for example, in here, we have the verb Pehua to start and nehnemi. So this Pehua nehnemi is how you would say he starts to walk. So first you have the auxiliary verb right here, auxiliary, the helping one. And then we have the verb itself, Pehua nehnemi, auxiliary plus verb. He starts to walk. It follows the same order that Spanish and English follow. Pehua nehnemi, starts to walk, or Spanish, empieza a caminar. Okay, so you can also put the prefixes if you want to say I start to walk. And now what it requires that you put the prefix ni in front of both of the verbs. So you would say ni pehua ni nehnemi. I start to walk. Ni pehua ni nehnemi. Ni pehua ni nehnemi. Quali. So in this case, you'll have the auxiliary and you have the verb, but the only difference is that you're putting this ni in both of them. Ni pehua, ni nehnemi, I start to walk. Kuali. So here I gave you all 6 forms of pehua. Pehua as an auxiliary verb. And so basically, ni pehua ni nehnemi, I start to walk. Ti pehua ti nehnemi, you start to walk. Pehua nehnemi, he or she starts to walk. Ti pehua ti nehnemi, we start to walk. Notice that the H is added to this verb and it's added to this other verb. So we say ti pehua ti nehnemi. Ti pehua ti nehnemi. We start to walk. Kuali? In pehua in nehnemi, y'all start to walk, and pehua nehnemi, they start to walk. Now I just noticed another error on my presentation. It's a we right there. Kuali. Okay. Exit full screen. All right, Kuali. So, and you notice that in the story, it didn't just have it in the present tense. We didn't just say he starts to walk. It was actually in the past tense. So you notice we had, you can do this in Nahuatl, and in the story it said Pehqui nehnemi. But if you wanted to say, which means he started to walk. But if you want to say I started to walk, all you do is put the ni in front of both of the verbs. So if you want to say I start to walk, you would say ni pehqui ni nehnemi. Ni pehqui ni nehnemi. Notice that the tense only goes on the first verb. It does not go on the second verb. So the auxiliary verb is the one that's telling you what the tense is for the verb. The second verb stays in present tense. Okay? Kuali, ni pehqui ni nehnemi. If you want to say it in the future, you change the first verb and it becomes ni pehuas ni nehnemi. Ni pehuas ni nehnemi. I will start to walk. Kuali? Kuali. All right. So you're probably thinking like, okay, yeah, I could say I start to walk, but what other situations could I use this? And here I gave you 4 other examples of other verbs where you could use them as auxiliary verbs, meaning that they're modifying the second verb. So in such examples as I finish something. So notice that to finish something is the verb tlamiltia. So if you want to say I finish it, you would say nik tlamiltia. So in Nahuatl, if a verb requires an object, it always requires an object. So if you're going to use this as a helping verb, you still need to put some kind of object. When it's acting as an auxiliary verb, pretty much it's always going to be the k. So it's going to be nik tlamiltia. I finish it. Nik tlamiltia. And the thing that I finish is the walking. Nik tlamiltia ni nehnemi. I finish walking. Nik tlamiltia ni nehnemi. Okay, you could say I continue to walk. So that verb is senquilia. So ni senquilia ni nehnemi. I continue to walk. Ni senquilia ni nehnemi. You could also say I can walk. And here it would be ni hueli ni nehnemi. I can walk. And lastly, and this was given to me as an example during my actual class, and they said, oh, what about I remember to walk? So here you could use that as an auxiliary verb. Basically, you can use any verb in front of the other, but you have to follow that pattern that I taught you in the class. So nikilnamiki, so you're going to put the k because this verb ilnamiki, to remember, it's a transitive verb, so it requires an object there. So nikilnamiki ni nehnemi. I remember it. And what is the it that I remember? I remember to walk. So nikilnamiki ni nehnemi. I remember to walk. Wali. So what I was trying to tell you in the last example was whenever you have a transitive verb like this verb tlamiltia, you must always put an object. So in this case, it's going to be nik tlamiltia if you're talking about I. Tik tlamiltia, inki tlamiltia, etc. Depending on which verb it is, you're gonna have to put an object there. So nik tlamiltia ni nehnemi, I finish walking. I wrote it at I finished to walk. That was a bad translation. It means I finish walking. I start to walk. I finish walking. Oops. I finish to walk. I finish walking. Okay. Kuali. So hopefully that's clear. If not, you could probably do the homework, which I have yet to make, but I'm gonna make it. So you say, I finished to walk in this way. Let me fix this camera. It doesn't fall. Quali. Okay, the imperfect tense. I know that was a lot of information. You're gonna get through this. Don't worry, this tense is super easy. So yeah, this is not one of the hard tenses. So basically, what is this imperfect tense? An imperfect tense is basically when something has not been completed, or I guess you used to do something. I don't even know. I don't know the grammatical things, to be honest. Okay, but I'll just illustrate it with you with an example. So for example, if you say nitlacua, you're saying I eat or I am eating, right? But if you add this suffix at the end, yaya, then you would say Nitlacuyaya, and that translates as I was eating. So like, for example, if I went to a restaurant and my friend came, and then right as I was coming, or as my friend was coming, I was eating. That's when I would use Nitlacuyaya. In that moment that my friend was coming, I was eating Nitlacuyaya. Or it could mean that you used to do something habitually in the past, but you don't no longer do it. So for example, I used to eat would be like Nitlacuyaya. So let's say I used to live in Mexico City or Mexico Tenochtitlan, and I used to eat in Mexico City. I would say Nitlacuyaya, Mexico Tenochtitlan. I used to eat, or Ipan, Mexico Tenochtitlan. I used to eat in Tenochtitlan or Mexico City because maybe I used to live there, or I don't know, etc. But basically it's a habitual thing that you used to do. So for example, I could say, I used to teach, ni tlamachiyaya, ni tlamachiyaya. Okay, so this tense is basically the exact same tense as in Spanish, yo comía, where you, in Spanish, it has both of them, both those meanings of I was eating and I used to eat. So if you speak Spanish as well as English, and now you're learning Nahuatl, basically this yaya is the same as the Spanish ia. Comía or caminaba or lloraba, or just like the ia and aba. ¿Cuali? Okay, so in the singular, it's just Nitlacuyaya, and in the plural, it's Nitlacuyaya with an H. So sounds pretty much, Titlacuyaya with an H, sounds pretty much the same. I want to point out too that in some varieties of Nahuatl, they only add one ya. So they might say Nitlacuaya, Nitlacuaya, and Titlacuaya, Titlacuaya. So they only add one ya, just letting you know. But in our variety, we are two yas. So Nitlacuayaya. All right. So in the imperfect tense, I gave you all 6 of the possibilities here. So Nitlacuayaya, I was eating. Titlacuayaya, you were eating. Tlacuayaya, he or she was eating. Titlacuayaya, Intlacuayaya, and Tlacuayaya, they were eating. Quali. So it's pretty, this tense is pretty simple, and it's not hard to understand. Notice that the verb doesn't change, right? So you have the present tense of the verb and you just add yaya to it. So Nitlacuayaya, I was eating. Now, the only time that this actually does change the verb a little bit is those class 3 verbs. So those class 3 verbs, you're gonna be dropping the A. So nimomachtia, I study, but you drop the A and you add the yaya here, and you would say nimomachtiaya, I was studying, or I used to study. Nimomachtiaya. All right, so if you remember from last class, I told you how to use the verb to be in the past tense, and I gave you other tenses. And here I'm just kind of giving you like a refresher. So if you remember, in Nahuatl, the verb to be in the present tense, there is no verb. So if you want to say I'm a teacher, you just put those prefixes, ni temachtiket, ti temachtiket, you're a teacher, temachtiket, he or she is a teacher, ti temachtiani, in temachtiani, and temachtiani. That's how you do it in the present. But if you remember also, I told you that if you are going to put any other tense that is not the present tense, in Nahuatl, you use this helping verb eli. So ni elki ni temachtiket, I was a teacher, and that ni elki is like a more definite I was a teacher and no longer am a teacher. I guess kind of similar to ni ilia, but ni ilia has like I used to be, and the ilia is actually more common. But anyways, ni elki ni temachtiket, ni temachtiket, I am a teacher, and ni elis ni temachtiket. Basically, you're gonna use this eli as this helping verb in any other tense. So this verb eli can also be used with this imperfect tense, and it becomes eliaya. So ni eliaya ni temachtiket, I was a teacher, or I used to be a teacher. Ti eliaya ti temachtiket, you used to be a teacher. Eliaya temashtiket, etc. So notice that we're putting the ni in front of this eliaya, this verb, and then the ni temashtiket in front of the noun, as we were doing it over here in the present tense and all the other tenses. So you still have to put the ni in both the verb and in the noun. So ni eliaya ni temashtiket, I was a teacher. These are the plural forms: ti eliaya ti temashtiani, in eliaya in temashtiani, and eliaya temashtiani. All right, I hope this class isn't taking too long. All right, so I put some examples in here, and now that I'm looking at them, I may not have translated them correctly, but I don't remember. We'll see if I made any errors. But basically, we're gonna build up. Now, I know that nobody's actually live watching me right now, but so I'm gonna give you like 2 or 3 seconds to think about this. But kenihki mo ilia ikanawat or shinechile ikanawat, tell me in Nahuatl. So kenihki mo ilia ikanawat, how do you say in Nahuatl? To say something. And there's only like 5 examples because I just give you like a summary of the class basically with these examples. But if you want more examples with answers, you do the homework. Shikchiwa chantekit. Do the homework, okay? Quali. To say something, it would be tlahtoa. Now, tlahtoa is actually more common across all the other varieties and not really as much in the Huasteca, although they understand it. So tlahtoa is the way to say to speak or to say something. But in Huasteca Nahuatl, they generally would say saniloa. Now, in this example, I just said tlahtoa just to keep it general, but they're more likely to say saniloa, ni saniloa. I say something, I speak. Okay, so I start to speak. Kenihki mo ilia. So let's think about it. I start to speak. Kenihki mo ilia. Give you 2 seconds. Okay, so let's start with the I start part. So start, the verb is Pehua. So ni Pehua, I start. The ni is the I, ni Pehua. And to speak, it's going to be tlahtoa. But you also have to put the ni twice. So notice it's going to be ni Pehua ni tlahtoa. I start to speak. Ni Pehua ni tlahtoa. Probably in Huasteca they say ni Pehua ni saniloa, but whatever. Ni Pehua ni tlahtoa. I start to speak. The ni is going to be here and it's going to be there. You got to put it in both spots. Okay. Wale. Oh, I started to speak in the past. I started to speak. So we have the word in present tense, it's ni Pehua ni tlahtoa. So all you have to do is change it into the past tense. So really, you only need to modify one verb here. So I'll let you think about it. Okay. So you're gonna turn the verb Pehua and you're gonna put it in the past tense. Pehua is a class 2 verb. It becomes Pehqui. So ni Pehqui ni tlahtoa. I started to speak. Vale. I will start to speak in the future. I will start. So you have the verb Pehua. What is the future tense of Pehua? Well, this one's really simple. Pehuas. So ni Pehuas, ni tlahtoa. I will start to speak. Ni Pehuas, ni tlahtoa. I will start to speak. Wale. I'm a Nahuatl speaker. So notice this is in the present tense. So there is no verb eli. So you're just going to say, ni Nahuatl tlatohket. Ni Nahuatl tlatohket. This is from last week's example, I think. So ni Nahuatl tlatohket. There's no verb eli here. However, if you want to say, I was a Nahuatl speaker, I was a Nahuatl speaker, I guess somehow you forgot. I don't know how you forgot, but you were. You forgot. And in this case, I don't want you to use elki because elki could also be a potential translation. But obviously we're talking about yaya because that's the point of the lesson. So ni iliyaya is how you would say it. And you still keep the ni nahuatl. Okay, so ni iliyaya ni nahuatl. I was a Nahuatl speaker. Ni iliyaya ni nahuatl. I was speaking. I was speaking. Now it's not I was a Nahuatl speaker. Now it's I was just speaking. Okay, so what is to speak? To speak is toya, right? So if you want to say you were doing it or you used to do it, you just add the yaya. But toya is a class 3 verb. So toya, you must drop the A. So ni yaya, ni yaya. I was speaking. Now, like I said, they're probably saying ni yaya. Notice that saniloa is also a class 3 verb and it's also an oa. So it's ni yaya is another way to say this. Ni yaya or ni yaya. Quali. Ooh. Oh, okay. So those are all my examples. I know it was a pretty slightly easy class today. It was very heavily grammatical and I have class participation and hopefully I'll get the work done by next week. So I actually have live people to answer my questions and think on the spot. Anyways, so this is basically the whole story, but now it just has the translation. So se tepechichi wan nopa kwawit tlen cerezo, a wild dog. I wasn't sure what it meant really. So a wild dog and that cherry tree is the translation. Se tepechichi wan nopa kwawit tlen cerezo. Now I'm saying it the Huasteca Chicontepec way. Se tepechichi wan nopa kwawit tlen cerezo. Quali? Setonal. So that was the title. Setonal se tepechichi asihko campasequawit tlen cerezo. One day, a wild dog arrived where there was a cherry tree. Quali? Pehqui nehnemi wan quiyawalostinenki. I'm putting it in the past tense. Quiyawalostinenki nopa quawit wan Ahcotlachiyaya. Huescapan. He started to walk and he went along encircling that tree and watching up high. And he was watching up high. Wali. Iitak para no pacuawit Quipixtoya miak itlahka tlenitoka cerezas katrinelia ahuiak. He saw that that tree had a lot of fruit called cherries, which are very delicious. ¿Vale? Juan Pehqui and Huitoni Chicahuac, Pampa Quipixtoya, que Pampa Moilhuitoya, que nopa huelis quiasis nopa cuatlacayot, pero yonse amo quiquic. Pero yonse amo quiquic. But okay. And then he started to jump hard or fast because he had thought that like that he would be able to reach that fruit, but nothing. He didn't grab anything. Basically, it's kind of a weird way that they wrote it. Pero yonse, but nothing. Amo quiquic. He got nothing. He didn't grab anything. Wali. Santlanki siyahki Huitoni. He just ended up, and I put tlanki in the past because I think it makes more sense. Santlanki siyahki Huitoni. He just got tired. He just ended up tired of jumping. Quali. Teipan ika pinawali wan Cualantli moilhuiqui san Yaha. And then with shame and anger, he thought to himself, Ipa amo ni nequiyaya ni cuatlacayot pampatlawel shokok. Well, anyways, I didn't want this fruit because it's very bitter. And I'm like, yeah, right. Okay, that was some kind of glitch. Oh, so tlazokamati miak y mojuantin tlen nechpalewihtoke, tlen nechpalewihtok, pampa tlawel niyolpaki. Tlawel niyolpaki pampa nechpalewihtoke. Y nechpalewihtoke. Thank you so much because you have helped me. There are no questions, and I'm gonna end the recording now, hopefully. But I stopped sharing the screen, right? Tasukamatimia kimojuantin, xikpiyakan se kualitonati, ximomokuitlahuican, wan xigolpaquican. Thank you very much, everybody. I hope that you're doing well and take care of yourself and be happy. We'll see each other in a week. Piali.